Welcome to the Midlife Pilot Podcast, episode number 8. The Midlife Pilot Podcast is, of course, a podcast all about being a pilot and flying in, call it midlife or maybe late first third of life. I don't know. In any event, this is episode number 8. My name is Chris Moran, also known as the Midlife Pilot. And as always, joining me tonight from his cozy studio abode in the greater Music Row area, Nashville, Tennessee, it's Brian Siskin. Good evening,
What's
sir.
going on? What's happening?
Got
a nice crowd in here right now. This is great.
Yeah.
Everybody's angry about you putting the wrong time on here.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I got everybody here early though. Look, we started off with a good audience tonight. If you're new to the podcast and just joining us on the audio version, we do record these every other Wednesday night at 8:00 p.m. Eastern. And that is live on YouTube and Facebook. And we have a ton of interaction with folks that join us here. It's a big part of the show. So we invite you to join us every other Wednesday night on the Midlife Pilot YouTube channel if you want to be a part of the live studio audience, as it were.
Yeah, and there's it's available in all the audio places. So go and do the thing where you subscribe to it and push buttons where it says, you say like, this is a good podcast or whatever. And those things help us. But yeah, by the way, thanks for entertaining this topic tonight, Chris. This is going to be, honestly, this is really selfish for me to propose this topic because I'm in the middle of flight planning for the biggest event of 2022. Clearly, you've got Sun and Fun, you've got Oshkosh, you got all these things that people are way into, but really it's about the Midlife Pilot fly-in to the Outer Banks, right?
And it's funny that this is actually the first time we're talking about this outside of our Patreon circle.
Yeah. Are we not supposed to?
Well, I mean, obviously I knew we were in the subject of tonight's podcast, but so we'll talk a little about that coming up, that event, because what we're planning to do on this podcast episode is work through a flight plan in real time, kind of planning a route, planning a flight for Brian's trip, which will be coming from, I guess it's not really Nashville where you're originating. It's in that general region, kind of southeast of Nashville. And then your trip is significantly longer than mine, coming from up here in Fairmont. So we thought this would be maybe a little bit more fun, challenging, probably route to plan. So we're going to work our way through that. Real quick, a couple details on the fly-in. They're not quite available to the general public yet. It's actually a pretty small event that we're waiting to fill up with patrons. And I think as of this morning, we have 2 spots left for patrons who want to join us. We're staying in our beach house in Corolla, North Carolina on the Outer Banks. It's spring break week, the week of April. You think I would have had these dates already pulled up. It's April.
This is why people should be a patron, right?
So you would have already known about it.
Yeah.
Thursday, April 21st arrival and departing on Sunday, April 24th. And so we're going to fly to Dare County Regional Airport, which is Kilo Mike, Quebec, India, KMQI. Have some rental cars there, eat some good seafood, enjoy some adult beverages, and then spend, weather permitting, Friday and Saturday flying to some of and we'll show you some of these on the chart when we get into the flight plan, but there are some really cool little airports along the Outer Banks. If you're not familiar with the Outer Banks of North Carolina, it's basically a barrier island reef, basically very, very narrow, the far eastern part of the eastern seaboard. And it's, there's a handful of islands kind of, strung up and down the North Carolina coast. And there's Hatteras has a cool little airport. And then Ocracoke Island has a cool little airport down there. I'm talking like paved strips, but right on the beach. I mean, like effectively beside the ocean. So it should be a pretty exciting.
There's also what are they called? What are they called? The Wright brothers?
The Wright brothers. Yeah.
The guys that invented this whole thing.
That's true. I left that one out. First Flight Airport in Kitty Hawk, FFA, and that's another stop on our tour there. It's really one of the draws for aviators that fly into that area really is to go see that kind of that. It's not a memoriam. It's like a monument, and kind of some of the history around the Wright brothers' first flight, where it
Yeah,
happened there.
get to
So,
see that 120 feet of the first flight.
yep, exactly. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Anyway, so we're going to open that up. If there are still spots in the house, we're going to open that up to non patrons in February. The easiest thing to do would be to visit patreon.com/midlifepilot and become a patron.
There you go.
If there are spots available currently, we open it up to the public after that if we don't fill those up, and then
It's cheaper
there's
to be a
always the
patron than to stay at the Hampton Inn. Let's just say that.
hey man, you could do that too. I was gonna say there's always options beyond that. If more people show an interest and want to get together, we could always coordinate other folks flying down kind of and staying on their own and just kind of meeting up there if those dates work out. So there's options. But yeah, we'll definitely be talking more about that in the weeks that follow coming up to April.
Yeah, and so for me, it is a long way, but to me, it's with all I have 103 hours now. It's a daunting thing to consider. I would imagine that no matter what, the weather's already got me at about a 50-50 as to whether I'm going to be able to get there or not. I've already sort of accepted that in my mind. But it's really important to have goals that you're building yourself up to. And so for me, this is going to be in towards the end of April, and so it's a really good thing for me to have as a goal. And then what can I be doing now to prepare to meet that goal? And the first thing I did, which maybe we talked about a little bit, I know we've talked about it behind the scenes, but the first thing I did was I got into a flight club so that I would actually have access to an airplane for overnights, so that I could actually take the plane, that far and for that long. And so this trip has precipitated me, doing that necessary sort of next step. And it is, about 80 minutes south of here, based out of Winchester. But for long trips and for, it's about half the rate of what I've been paying. So all considering, this is something I really, needed to do anyway. So that was really the first step. And then beyond that, I haven't done a lot of this cross countries to that length at all. I haven't done anything that ambitious, and it presents a whole different set of challenges and considerations that I think I'm interested in taking on and seeing what happens.
Well, and I think this is what it's all about, really. I mean, some of these, I still enjoy jumping out in the plane and just poking holes in the sky and doing patterns, and like that's all still very fun to me anytime I
Of
get to
course.
fly. But I mean, I've been at it a little bit longer than you, but I feel like I haven't done, other than the Oshkosh trip last year, I haven't really done any trips either.
Hmm.
And so I think the more of these that we start to incorporate, that's really what it's all about. So for tonight, we are going to be walking through planning a flight, and our tool of choice is going to be ForeFlight. We're going to use the web version of ForeFlight, and we're actually going to model it using the airplane that the Brian's going to fly, a Cessna 172P. I'm actually taking the Cessna 2. Like, I'm bringing 5.2 Lima down rather than the Cherokee, just because I think it'll be a better slow, sightseeing kind of just putz around airplane.
Yeah.
And
Plus, you can make some extra cash, maybe pick up some banners.
exactly, I could go do some banner towing and such. Um, so I'm going to share my ForeFlight window, and I think we'll just maybe jump right into how we would plan a flight. We'll just kind of talk through it as we go. What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds great. And by the way, what is the distance for you to Dare County? Just out of curiosity.
Well, why don't we find out?
Let's look at it.
If it was going to be for my flight, uh, it is a 300 nautical mile trip in 2 hours and 37 minutes.
Oh, that's great.
So that's a little nicer. Yeah. We'll plan mine another time. Probably not on the podcast, though. So Brian's already given me his. So this is ForeFlight Web. If you haven't seen it, I'm actually going to make this full screen. If I do that, can they still hear us? That's the only question.
I'm pretty darn sure they can. They'll tell us if they can.
Yeah, let's test this out. It's going to be easier for everyone to see, I think.
And we'll do our best for the audio podcast audience to, make this as exciting as possible.
For sure. If you guys cannot hear us, please like yell so that we know that that is the case. Of course, they won't hear me say that. Anyway, um, here is ForeFlight Web. It's basically ForeFlight, but it's in a web UI. And just a website. So Brian's already given me. We've done a little bit of preliminary homework by adding the airplane that he's going to fly to the aircraft section, and put in one very basic performance profile that we based from a POH associated with his airplane, where we kind of picked the cruise. Brian didn't even see me do this. I picked the cruise, an RPM setting, a power setting, cruise, and fuel burn. So we'll have that kind of information kind of pre-built in here into ForeFlight. And then the way I always start is I go to the maps page first, and I like to just click the flight plan tab and pop in the starting airport and the destination airport. And so your starting airport is what?
Kilo Bravo Golf Foxtrot.
And KMQI is the destination. So this is kind of the base level view, right, where we kind of can just see the trip as a whole, get an idea of what we're looking at. In a straight line, it's 509 nautical miles point to point. That is significantly longer than my trip.
Yeah.
But as Brian has pointed out to me already, as we've talked a little bit in advance of this, he has two objectives with this flight also. One is to visit family at a different location along this route, and the other is maybe to avoid some of the mountains here, which I think both are a completely reasonable approach, because you're very close to the southern. Your flight path is already very close to the southern end here of most of the high terrain, so it's not a huge deal to kind of make flight plans. So I'm going to plug in the stuff that you gave me already, the route that you provided me, that you've kind of pre-built. We'll just kind of talk through it and let it.
Yeah, it's my best stab at what I think, with no consultation. And by the way, people should know that, I'm actually, it doesn't matter what I come up with or what we come up with before I do this trip. I'm making sure that I will get this in front of my CFI and just
Absolutely.
triple check, because this, I don't trust myself enough to just be like, yeah, that looks pretty good. I don't know. I mean, it's probably fine, but second and third pairs of eyes are always a good thing.
The more eyes, the merrier. So we know also that you have uh, your usable fuel in that airplane is what?
40.
40 gallons. Okay, so that'll be good to know as we kind of plan through here where to stop. All right, let's jump back in. So taking a look at the route here, you can see we're looking to avoid the mountains through. Where was your stop? What was your stopping airport? Was it INT?
Yeah, so that'd be in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and really the goal is not necessarily to stop there. I'd like to try to get the whole trip done if I can. It just depends on what's going on and then the conditions and all that. Another precept that people maybe should know is that I'm giving myself 2 days to be able to sort of work this, in terms of weather, or, if it's something where it's more advantageous to get in front of the weather and beat it, then I have the ability to do that. If it's something where I need to wait something out, then I have a full day built in to be able to wait out any weather.
Right. Yeah.
And there might be more, but I'm saying, like, that's what I'm planning for. And then KINT is my hometown, and that's the last airport that I ever flew with my dad at. And so it would mean a lot to me to be able to go just land and take off at the airport, much less stop and see anybody. So
Very cool.
that's what that's about. And it seems like it's a logical point anyway, unless I want to go south of Charlotte. And if I'm really shooting myself in the foot to go to Winston-Salem, then I'm happy to cut that out.
So what I normally do then, I'm just kind of looking at each leg, and I'm looking at the big numbers, just to kind of get an idea of what the kind of the minimum safe these quadrants,
Yep.
just to kind of get an idea of the terrain we're flying. According to ForeFlight, currently based on a 9-knot tailwind at 6,000 feet, performance profile 5,500 feet, cruising altitude, this entire trip would take 38 gallons. So we're obviously going to stop. I mean, you're not going to fly 5 hours anyway. But my point is, you have a lot of options of where you want to stop, right? Because you could assume halfway you have only used 20 gallons of fuel by the time you get up here to like wherever we are here.
So what
This,
you're saying is I don't need to stop. I've got just enough to make it the whole way.
well, I mean,
I'm just kidding.
rock and
No.
roll. Leroy Jenkins, the thing,
Right,
send
right.
it. So I want to just look at, get an idea of this. I think this is a pretty wise selection. You can also make some logical determinations. Like there are some quadrants of the sectional chart, like this one, where the safe altitude is listed at 5,400 feet, but it's obvious why that is. I mean, you're going to cross through this southern tip of it, but the highest obstacle here at 1,100, 1,000 feet, 1,100.
Yeah, and that's kinda what I
It's
was
this
seeing. Yeah.
quadrant, right? That's your problem, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
some of them you use common sense. You wouldn't say, oh, but 50, I can't fly this route at 5,500 because this little section I fly through is 54. No, I mean,
Yeah.
the common sense will kind of guide you through some of that. So I think 5,500 is it would be a safe altitude for this trip. Now, the wind will be a big factor in that. We'll talk more about that a bit as we get deeper into the plan. But for now, we'll just leave these numbers as they are.
Okay.
I think your route is totally fine. I think you did exactly what you wanted to, which is avoiding the terrain. And there's also a significant amount of options to land should you need to. Your
Yeah, and
route
that was the
also
thing.
takes you.
That's why I didn't use necessarily, VFR waypoints or any of that kinda stuff. I just wanted to have airports that I'm sort of, dotting the whole way.
So the next thing I might look at, if you were already planning a stop at KINT, the next thing I might do, since it's the next to the last waypoint in your flight, is I might take the destination out and see what your estimated fuel burn and time
Yeah,
be to here.
that's a good
And it looks
stopping.
like it
Yep,
would be a 3-hour flight, 25 gallons of fuel from here to here.
perfect.
So then I might come up here and turn on the 100 low lead layer and start to get an idea of what fuel prices look like. Because the other thing would be if KINT's fuel is like $2 a gallon more than its next door neighbor, you might consider not getting fuel there and getting
Yeah,
fuel
so
somewhere
let me tell
else.
you about how that works with the flight club. It might be the same with yours, but whatever the fuel price is at the originating airport, which is KBGF, that's the level to which I will be reimbursed for the wet rate that I'm
I
getting.
see.
And it's and for those who are curious, my flight club rate is $80 an hour wet.
That is pretty good. That is pretty good.
It's pretty good.
And what is the current fuel price just for our planning? The current fuel price at your home airport appears to be $4.61. That was updated 11 hours ago. So I would say that's pretty accurate.
Yep.
461, which is pretty good. It's 518 at my airport. KINT is charging $5. So I mean,
Negligible.
I would think pilots always crack me up. Pilots that always insist on landing at a different airport to get fuel always crack me up because they're like, I can save 12 cents a gallon going like 27 miles away, right, to like land and fill up and take off. And I'm thinking, buddy, by the time you climb out of there again, you've burned all the savings off again. Like, if it was significant, sure, but like for
Right.
like 15 cents a gallon, I mean, I don't think I would even consider stopping somewhere else. So that, to me, Brian, again, this
Yeah.
is your flight.
No,
That
that's
seems like
fair.
pretty reasonable. Now, can you sit in a Cessna 172 for 3 hours?
So that's something I've never tried to do, and so people should maybe know what the longest cross country I've ever done where I just never got out of the plane was the one where you're training and it's the long cross country you do. I forget, it has to be 150 nautical miles, or what is it? I think I did,
Yeah,
mine
I
was
think so.
170. And that was back when I was training. So the whole time I was probably just white knuckling it and just, I can't, like, what am I doing out here? So like that was just like a sustained panic attack for
Right.
3 legs. But no, but I mean, like I just did yesterday, I did a 67-mile cross country and it felt like a hop, skip, and a jump, right? It didn't feel like that big of a deal. So if I'm going to go, 3 to 4 times that length, it doesn't feel like it'd be that crazy. And I have
The
plenty of,
other nice thing, flying a VFR route like that, if you decide that it is too much, just land somewhere. I
that's,
mean,
yeah, that's
you
it.
have Yeah, for
And just
flight
people
with
should
you.
know
So
also that I will be doing this, as far as I know, by myself. Unfortunately, my wife is unable to go because of standardized testing times, and she's a teacher, and there's just no way to easily get out of that period. So we'll have to come back in the summer with her. But in the meantime, and she's much more of a better person than I am. But in the meantime, you'll have to just deal with me. But anyway, so yeah, I'll be by myself. 3 hours doesn't seem totally crazy, and obviously, if I have human needs, I can stop somewhere.
for sure. Um, all right. So also while we're working through this in the chat room, if anybody wants to post any tips about cross country flight planning, questions about flight planning, we'll be getting plenty of
Or
those here
or
on the second half.
if you see something along my route where you're like, I tried that route once, that was a terrible idea. Here's
Right.
why.
Exactly. It'd be
Please give
nice
me
to
that.
know.
But yeah, I mean, and the other thing too is, as much as I'm happy to sort of consider it just to the Winston-Salem part, I do want to consider the entirety of the trip, and I do have the goal of getting there all in one shot. Uh, Even if I go to Winston and eat and take a nap for an hour or something, but still, like I feel like I don't know. I mean, so here's the other catch, and this is a little bit of a curveball that's maybe not going to be most helpful to this conversation, but my home airport or my second home airport where I'm getting this plane is about an hour and 20 minutes away. Theoretically, if I wanted, I could bring that plane up to the airport that's 5 minutes from my house the day before, make sure everything's good, tie it down, and then that way I'm not using my fresh energy day to spend an hour and a half driving down there and all that and getting the plane fully out and all that. So maybe that's a thing. So maybe I should also consider adding on that. I don't know. It's just a thought.
That's interesting. Is there a is there a penalty is there a penalty to that? I mean, is there
It'd
any?
just be another no. I mean, it's because the
Oh,
the
because you're
the
going to put the time on it already, right? That's the idea.
right. Yeah. So I mean, I would have to pay for, I guess, for the tie down. It'd be like $10, but um, I could probably even finagle that since it's my home airport. But anyway, but I guess the point is just. But what's funny is when I was looking at that first step of the route, like if you pull that back up,
Yes.
if I'm looking at if you look at the beginning point, the KBGF, it really is sort of a head start on that sort of turn around the mountains. The one thing I was looking at is if I went out of KJWN, uh, like if you just added that as the first leg on there, if you just put KJWN in front of KBGF, just to kind of get a sense of if I was just going to add that on and do that continuum, now that's what I'm looking at. Or does that put me north enough where if I started there, that there might be a northbound route that would be not necessarily going around the south? I'm just asking, like, I feel like these are the kind of questions and considerations that when you're learning how to flight plan, you just kind of, you don't really get. It's all that common
No,
sense
I'm not
stuff.
going to give lessons.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm not equipped to give lessons in like quote unquote mountain flying, and I only say that because like
Right.
we say mountain flying over here on the East Coast. Like we don't know mountain flying. This isn't. This, these are mountains technically, yes, but these aren't like the Rockies, right? Or some
Correct.
of the Alaska stuff. Like I mean, that's not. So
Yeah. We
you
don't have
could
we don't have
cross.
172s flying into the side of these mountains every day. Yeah.
That's right, but also you could cross any of these. You could in April. I mean, there's no reason you couldn't cross here anywhere. I mean, my God, there are airports here, right? I mean, so
Yeah.
it's not a barrier. It's a comfort level thing. But like just randomly looking here by Asheville, I'm looking right here by Hot Springs, Alexander. Like, look at this cut. I mean, we're talking about terrain through here. I don't know if you can see this
I
on
could
the
just
screen. We're
follow
talking
I-40.
about 2,000 feet. Right, the interstate cuts through here.
I like what Ben Singer said in here. He said that he said to me to plan a north and a south route, and then essentially I have more options based on what the weather is doing.
Yeah,
Which I think is
that's
a
a good
great. I
idea.
mean, that's like have a plan B, C, and D. Yeah. So what does a northern route look like?
Well,
Like,
let's
like
look at
what am I
one.
really introducing? So with this highest elevation, 7,000. I mean, that's as a novice new
Well,
pilot, that seems a little crazy.
it's not. I mean, I
Yeah.
my first cross country to the Greenbrier, my solo country to the Greenbrier, I flew at 9,500 feet.
Okay.
I mean, because of clouds, I was over a layer.
Yeah.
So there's no difference. I mean, it takes longer to get there, but like the plane, you're not getting into like top end of the airplane, like 12,000 feet service
Right.
ceiling
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I wouldn't. Again, this is everybody's own individual comfort level, and it certainly depends on the weather. Like, also, if there's ceilings, could be a factor here, right? Certainly, you don't know what the clouds are going to be. Like, you could be trapped by the clouds through here.
Yeah.
Um, North, though, here's the only thing about North, other than this little cut right through, like northwest of Asheville here,
Mm-hmm.
this is all pretty much the same. I mean, we're talking about this is all pretty much the same if you're talking about strictly elevation until you get up here near. I mean, you're getting closer to my neck of the woods. I think I think if you want to avoid the mountains, you're talking about, you know up in this area, like right in
That's
here.
a good ways out. It
And
looks
it
like.
feels
Yeah.
like, yeah. Well, I don't know though. I mean, if you
Yeah.
look at the on course, right? I mean, maybe it isn't that crazy. What if we just said John Tune to let's just call this KVGI, VJI. Yeah, 551 nautical miles, 4 hours 41 minutes all the way. And that brings you up here to like this area where it's a little less crazy. I mean, you're talking about 5,000 feet um, mountains up through here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I'm familiar with Ashe County area and all that.
So that doesn't feel crazy to me.
Well, yeah.
You'd obviously have to amend your cruising altitude, which, depending on the wind, which we'll get to in a minute,
Mhm.
may on a trip like this, Brian. I mean, my experience, limited experience, of course. Uh, these eastbound flights, a lot of times you'll find, the higher elevation to be even beneficial. This straight line actually works pretty well straight off of your airport. I mean,
Mhm.
Nashville approach is going to work with you. This won't be any problem. Um,
Yeah.
they'll work you
I mean,
out. They'll
honestly,
get
like,
you out.
by the time you get out of tune to the north, you're almost clear of the Charlie anyway, but yeah.
So that, you won't have any problem getting there.
But they're
I don't
nice. They're nice at B&A. I've had good experience.
I don't see any problem with this route. I mean, you could even continue this a little bit further if you wanted to get just even a little bit more out of that area. Here's one thing I love about Four Fly. If we want to experiment with a new route, how about we just do
Mhm.
this?
Mhm. And that's the
Or
thing
even,
too, is like I'm always thinking like, okay, if I can just add 5 minutes to the trip, but I'm buying myself, 1,500 feet over a sustained period of time, that could be the difference
yeah,
between a successful forced landing and not.
right. Or even if we went to like this VOR,
Hmm.
I think this plan works. So let's call this the North route, because it's basically the same thing, right?
Hmm.
You get to Winston Salem, um, and then you can decide what you want to do on the backside for navigation. It's funny, I still fly VORs,
Hmm.
because they're always like my backup. So like I would look at this route and be like, oh, I'm definitely going to fly this Tar River VOR, because it's right along my route anyway. Like I
Yeah.
don't go out of my way super much to find them, but if there is one I
Yeah.
can dial in and have, dialed up where I can track the radio if I need to. Um, so if we said this was reasonably a north route, just for hypothetical
I
sake,
like this.
the next thing I would do would be I would send this to flights. I would click the send to flights button up here,
Hmm.
because then what it'll do is take us to this page in For Flight, which basically is a page where we can do even more research. Like if we want to look at my altitude advisor is my favorite section of flight planning, where you tell it your VFR eastbound, and then because we're so far out right now, this isn't super helpful. It says
Historical.
yeah, wind forecasts are not available because we're months away. So it's using historical winds. But as you get closer, this will be real winds. So here's where I start looking at. Okay.
Well, if I go to 11.5, I'm saving 3 minutes.
Listen, man, what I'm saying to you is at 5.5 with an 11 knot tailwind, you're going to burn 37.3 gallons and be 441. 9.5 cuts 10 minutes off of that, and you're burning 4/10 of a gallon less, plus you've got 4,000 extra feet of decision time under you.
That's
So
what
if
I
it's
want.
me, I'm flying 9,500 all day long.
Yep.
Then the things start to even out, right? I would say like I'm only saving 3 minutes to go to 11.5. Then I'm getting into
Yeah.
weird areas like close to the service ceiling, close to oxygen. I'm like, I don't want to mess
Yeah.
with that necessarily.
Nope.
But 95 to me on this equation looks like the perfect. Now that's not exactly accurate, Brian, in this case, because we would need to do a different performance profile
Yeah. I understand.
for that altitude to really compare apples to apples here. But like,
Yeah.
so that's what I would do next, and then I would save this flight. And if we wanted to go back now to the
I
map
would
and
change
do
it
a
to VFR also. I don't know why
oh
it's
yes,
ForeFlight
thank
defaults to
you.
IFR. It makes me crazy. I wish you
Yeah,
could tell it to just, you know,
exactly.
like, can't you see
So,
ForeFlight that I don't have that rating in the system?
so then I would go back to the map, same route that's in here, and start finagling it again. Like if we want a southern route, go back to our southern plan,
Mm,
um, which I now sadly have deleted.
that's okay. You
But
can just swap out. But yeah, you're fine.
BGF was in there, right, and some other stuff. Actually, I probably still have it saved in my clipboard. Yeah. So then we could start, messing with that again, looking at fuel prices, looking at stuff, and then I would do the same thing. I would hit the flights again. We'd look at it again and blah blah blah. I would of course break these up into different flights. Like if I was gonna stop at Winston-Salem,
Yeah.
that would be a flight in here. My origin to destination would be one, and then my next flight that I would add would be Winston-Salem to there because
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
fuel, for just all the reasons. It
Yeah.
would not be a continuation flight. Yeah.
So one dull geek has oh he pulled it in. I see. That was the route that we had. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Um yeah, I mean it's it's one of those things where you don't know until really the day what the weather's going to be, but I think it makes total sense to have a northern route and a southern route and some good options for both. I do like it's sort of like if I can just get to Winston-Salem, I know I've got some safety there as far as people that I know or whatever.
Right.
So like that's but ultimately I can stay wherever. I can sleep in the FBO somewhere or whatever on a couch. I don't care. So there's that. And then what was the other thing I was curious about? It was by the way, before we move on, so what do you think about I have to be thinking about myself, right? My condition, I'm safe kind of stuff, right? Do you think it makes more sense to get the plane a day early and bring it up to Nashville and just kind of have it? And then also I've flown it at least a reasonable, it's about a 70-mile flight from Winchester back up here. That might be a good way for me to sort of get a sense of if anything is getting goofy with the plane, let me find that out now. Um,
Sure.
I don't know, but what do you
I
think?
think if there's no penalty, here's the downside in your case is that if it stays at its home airport, it's in a hangar versus being outside at
Yeah.
your airport. So that weather would be a factor there potentially, although in April,
Nah.
we're not talking about freezing. I mean, it's not going to be there won't be like an issue with ice or frost generally or that kind of thing probably.
Yeah.
Is one or the other better or worse? I don't know your area in terms of like morning fog or whatnot. That
Yeah.
would
I
be
mean,
a factor in my mind. I would be thinking about
it's
that
definitely a
probably.
thing. It's definitely a thing. I guess I'm just curious about just putting an
But if
hour and a half of driving in front of
yeah,
everything else. And then also just the idea that, because when I bring it back, the owner lives also in Nashville. He'd be probably more than happy to like really, oh, the plane's at John Tune, great. you know, I'll take it.
right,
And get back down to my other, he's got a debonair. Anyway. So it's all this little idiosyncratic stuff, right? This just, it's the plan, it's the flight plan, it's all the calculations, but it's also the circumstantial and the, like, what's the best way to go about it. But I think that the more I think about it, I should probably leave out of John Tune so that if I get in the air, I'm already kind of in that space. Burning an hour and a half in the morning in the car on the way down seems like some motor concentration that I'd rather reserve for being
sure,
fresh. Yeah. So,
absolutely, yeah. I
so
mean,
I
if
just
there's
changed
no
my plan.
penalty, yep. If there's no penalty to do that, I don't think there's any reason. any reason not to do that. We'll jump to a couple questions while we're kind of in this what feels like a transition period. I don't know what we're transitioning to, but Stephen Caldwell is asking, do you have any input on ADS-B in devices for use with ForeFlight? And that is a great question. I have been an advocate for ADS-B in general aviation. I wish it was a mandate in more airspace than it is. I wish ADS-B out was required on every aircraft, regardless of where you're flying. Because I just think it is such a. I've already seen in my very short time, pilots want to be all macho and act like you see every airplane because you're the best pilot that looks outside all the time and sees every airplane. And don't give me that. I can tell you already countless times that I would not have known about other traffic had it not been for that.
By the
Anyway,
way, oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I was just going to say I'm a huge advocate for it, and in my case, our Cherokee has ADS-B in as part of the Garmin. It's in the panel. It's part of our Garmin suite, and the 172 does not. I actually put one of the very first cheap Stratux, Stratux, homemade, based on
Raspberry Pi.
a Raspberry Pi kit. Thank you.
Yeah.
In 5.2 Lima, and it has been in there since I started using it in 2018. And we bus power. We have a USB port on the panel that powers it. It sits on the back window. I ran a USB extension cable under the carpet to the back window. It's on every time the airplane is on, and it works 100% of the time. And we've been super, super happy with that. Lots of people have their little Stratus devices. They're also reasonably affordable these days. I think they're a few $100s, worth every penny. If
I
you
have the
don't have
Stratus 3.
ADS-B in, I don't know that I would make a 500-mile trip without an iPad and ADS-B in 2022. I just don't think I would do it.
Yeah, and I was gonna say when you're talking about like being able to see aircraft. Just yesterday, I had the most bizarre experience because um, I was on this cross country. I saw a plane coming up behind me in line with me, but about 200 feet below me. He's going a little faster, and he was just creeping up on me, creeping up on me, creeping up on me, and I'm turning out to the side and trying to look back, and I'm dipping wings. I'm like, where is this guy? He's getting closer and closer and closer. I veered out to the left, and just, it didn't seem like he was adjusting. Basically, I could tell that we were both on the same GPS route to go to the same airport.
Mm-hmm.
And so I veered out, and I mean, I looked for this guy. He was, and then he passed me, and we were more or less at the same altitude. I swear to God, I thought that I was losing my mind. I thought it was like one of those phantom things, but I'm like, nope, that's his in number. I'm looking at his plane. Oh, it's a Cherokee, and this guy was right next to me, right underneath me,
Yep.
and then kept going in front of me. And then I heard him on the radio saying that he was coming in the same airport. He said when he was on the downwind, he said he was when he was on base. And here I am making space so that I'm way behind him. And he tells me, he says on the radio, he's coming on a final, and I still can't see him. I don't know. Like, it's the weirdest thing. It's almost like your eyes sometimes just don't work. No matter, like, some days it feels like it's on and I'm seeing everything, and other days I can't see what's right in front of me.
Right.
You ever have that?
Oh yeah, all the time. So we had, I can think of two that come to mind immediately. One was, I don't know if anybody who's seen I did a 2 video part series on our trip to Oshkosh last year in the 235, and on the way back we did actually both directions. We did the Chicago coastline, low altitude under the Bravo at 1500, like right up the Great Lake coast of Chicago. And I mean, of course, they're calling out. We're on flight following, and they're calling out traffic. There's traffic targets. There's 100 of them, in our vicinity all the time, and so that's super helpful. But we had one guy very similar to what you're saying on our way back who was behind us and off to our right. Who Cody was in the right seat. He saw it and we was keeping an eyeball on this guy only because we saw it on ForeFlight initially. It was the same deal. He was doing the same route we were, same altitude. He was slightly faster than us though, so it was also gaining on us. So it was like that was one example. And then a video that's coming out hopefully this weekend for patrons, and then the following week for everybody else. Rebecca, Cecilia, and I went when it snowed here 2 weeks ago. We took a snow flight and we just went out to look at the snow, basically in the 172, and we're coming back. And a couple guys I know that have a 182 out of Fairmont were leaving Fairmont, going opposite direction. Um, and we saw them on Four Flight way before ATC called them out to us. But it was the same situation. Cecilia and I looked for them for probably 5 minutes
Yeah.
as they were getting closer and closer. We were several miles. I mean, we had separated ourselves by several miles, but Cecilia, I never saw them. Cecilia eventually saw them when they were 3 miles directly off our wing. I never did see them, which is fine because they were never a factor 3 or 4 miles away. But like, yeah,
You just don't
I
know when
just
that,
think,
like, that's close enough to where one abrupt movement can make all the difference. So you have to be on your guard, right? Yeah. I mean, it's
yeah,
just at least you have somebody else. I haven't flown by myself on a cross country in a while, and I was really feeling the pain of not having somebody in the right seat to be able to look over. And I was thinking, well, maybe I should go over this way so I can see him from the left. But I thought, no, because if he's going to overtake me, he needs to be able to do that on the right. And so, isn't that
yeah,
correct? Yeah.
yes.
So,
If they're gonna overtake you, they should be doing it on your right.
yeah. So I was kind of moving out to the left and then raising the wing and lowering the wing, but trying not to turn back into his path. And I mean, it was probably about a mile of separation but it was enough to make me
Yeah,
just very aware. So yeah, those things are funny. It's so yeah, ADSB mission critical, definitely do it. By the way, good question here from Johnny McClung. It's a very open question, but I think that he's come to the right place.
yeah, for sure. Do you have any advice for a middle-aged man thinking about getting his private pilot? But Johnny, you have found uh, those are the questions that we are attempting to answer in every episode of the podcast and on every video on the YouTube channel and everywhere else. Uh, it is a it is a process. Um, I see you're getting lots of good advice from Bearded Aviator and others in the chat about the fact that bank account is definitely an impact. It's a bank account changing thing. But I will say this: there are ways to do it. I have gotten a little bit of a reputation for being anti-flight school, which I'm not, because Brian had a really good experience with the school that he trained at around Nashville. Um, we don't have, there just aren't a bunch of options in my region. I feel like I really lucked out. My circumstance could not have worked out better by finding a CFI like Tyler, who was teaching on the side, um, charging a reasonable hourly rate. I mean, like overly generous. I say reasonable. Overly generous is the better description of how he was with me. And then to find an airplane that was being rented by its owners for a super reasonable rate. I mean, those two things combined saved me a fortune. So I guess if you're just thinking about getting started, my 2 points of advice, and if the financial part is a kind of a top concern, I would say reach out, friends of friends. I found Tyler and the airplane through friends of friends on a Facebook post, a frustrated Facebook post that I made when I couldn't get in the flight school in Morgantown, which was like, does anybody know an instructor, and does anybody know a plane? And both of those were hooked up with me by friends of friends on Facebook, and that's how I found Tyler and the airplane. So I would say don't immediately assume your only option is the local flight school. I mean, do a little bit of research, and then plan to work hard. Remember how to study again. That was probably the second hardest part for me, which was because I haven't had to do it since school, really, like I did for this process, which was just to be very serious about it and put the energy in to take it seriously and study it. And what about you? You got other pointers, Brian?
I would say understand that you're probably going to, as a middle-aged pilot, you're gonna have to work a little harder, and it's gonna come a little slower. In most cases, you're gonna feel sometimes like you're older than you are, or you're gonna be feeling sometimes like you're getting lapped by young whippersnappers. But I've said many times, I feel like I'm the same reflexes and mental acuity and whatever that I was 20 years ago. I feel like exactly the same. I don't feel like I have any real limitations or differences, but there are.
There
And
are.
so,
That's a great point. Acknowledge that and just be aware that that is, don't be Superman. I mean,
well,
just
but we as middle-aged men have, or people, women, everybody, is life experience to understand. You've seen evidence in other areas of your life that you get out of something what you put into it, and everything is earned. And so if you just make a commitment to yourself to say, I'm going to be the most studied, hardest working, most dedicated student that this instructor has ever had, then you will be fine. And
Ben Singer.
when you're spending that much money, you
Oh
better do
yeah.
that.
Yeah, Ben Singer has another a good piece of advice, which is to plan on scheduling lessons 2 to 3
Oh
times
yeah.
a week.
Yeah.
If you
Oh
take
yeah.
lessons once every week or two, it's going to cost a lot more because you'll spend half of that time, kind of to recap and kind of relearn stuff that you may have
I
forgotten.
would even
Plus,
say I would say even book 3 to 4 a week. And the reason I say that is because I thought that I was doing pretty well when I was booking 2 to 3 times a week. And let me tell you, I usually got one flight a week. Because even when I booked 2 or 3 a week, because weather, maintenance, instructor going on vacation last minute or getting some other gig that he's got to go do real quick or something. So I would say to maintain 2 to 3 flights a week, you better probably book 3 to 4. And
yeah,
then if it ever all works out in a row, then you just have a badass week where like you really kind of have some speed round, kind of make some real quick progress, and then the breaks will come.
right, right. I'm going to bring this question up, Brian, just because I think this is going to be a good discussion. It's actually going to dovetail into something. We had an email conversation. We have not talked about this. We had an email conversation last week about doing things with or without an instructor and with other people. And this is going to be a good segue. I want to talk about that.
Oh yeah, yeah. We haven't
Okay,
talked
'cause
about this.
I think it was kind of interesting. But One Dog Geek says, "Is the goal to do this trip solo? Would you think about doing something like this with a pilot friend first?" And I have opinions on it, and you probably do too. But I thought our conversation by email. I want to dovetail into that because
Yeah,
I think there's some good points that come out of that. But I'll
absolutely.
let you answer. It's your address to you. So would
Okay.
you think about doing this like with a pilot friend first?
I would say the first question is, Brian, is the goal to do this trip solo? No, that's not a goal. That's just the way it's kind of working out. So I don't have that intentionality about it in terms of like I've got to do this by myself. That being said, I'd be happy to do it by myself. And in certain ways, honestly, I feel like I'm like this with even road trips in a car, where it's like if I'm with other people, it seems like it takes 3 times as long, and I'm spending so much tax and distraction on making sure that other people are happy, and do you need to stop, and all this kind of stuff. Whereas if I'm by myself, I can just get in the zone and I can just go. Um, all that being said, do I have any concerns about going by myself? Maybe is a more adequate question for this.
Yeah, I think it's a safety question is
Yeah,
what he's getting at there. Like,
yeah,
would you?
and so I think in that sense, yes, I have concerns, and what I have thought about, and I was even pondering this today, is finding another pilot friend, um, to do, um, a long flight from Nashville to Winston-Salem, and kinda go about halfway or a little bit more than halfway, and really make sure that that mountain route makes sense, and really be sure that of how that feels. And then I thought if I brought another pilot friend, we could split the costs and do simulated um, instrument work along the way, and it could be a sort of functional cost saving things. I mean, if I get so and let me ask, God, there's always so many questions, Chris, but side note, quick detour. In your flight club, are there restrictions? Club members only are allowed to be PIC in your planes, correct?
Correct.
But
That's an insurance
right.
requirement.
But in the case of simulated instrument with a safety pilot, is that
The book, well, I mean, because they are PIC at the time that you are in Foggle. So, if you're playing by the book,
okay?
then yes. So I'm
Okay.
not going to tell you
So
on this
maybe I can't do that.
podcast.
So maybe
Yeah,
I
I'm not
can't do
going to answer that question. Like,
that.
I mean,
I don't want to break the rules. I was just thinking, I'm just brainstorming here, but maybe like a pilot friend, great. But we'd be even
right,
better as if we did $40 an hour a
right.
piece
Oh,
on that
absolutely.
trip and got simulated time. And maybe it's something where I could get that cleared specifically ahead of time. I don't know. But anyway, that's so I do have that's because that was the other part of that question is sort of kind of doing a test run in some way. And I do think that I'd like to do that without putting myself out budget wise too much, if I can. So I do have concerns about being by myself on it, but I also feel like I'm at the point where the challenge of being by myself for even 65 miles versus 300 at this point, I'm not sure really what the difference is, except for maybe just getting more comfortable.
That is the point I wanted to make to you, which
Okay.
is the distance doesn't matter. Because I used to have this discussion with my wife. I was like, "Do you want to go do this thing?" She's not a super huge. If you've seen her on the channel, like it's still a big ask for her to get in the airplane and go somewhere. So she's just not comfortable in that. And she would say like, "Ooh, we want to go there. That's a pretty long flight for you." And I said, "It's I still have to take off once and land once. Whether it's like 6 miles away or like 300. So like if all else is equal, I mean, obviously there's weather consider. There is more that goes into
More
the
time for an engine to go out or whatever.
sure. But my point to you was going to be like to answer his question also was going to be like if there are specific like components of a flight, like if you were like the mountain stuff, like definitely ask somebody who's familiar with mountain flying about like
Yeah.
how high should I fly over these areas if they're
I have asked.
6,500
Yeah.
feet, like
Yep.
like what are my considerations for this new mountain flying thing that I haven't done before or whatever. I don't think there's any reason that this flight for you is not a solo. I mean, that I wouldn't think twice about it. And that what I wanted to lead to our conversation. So we had this. Brian sent me an email. He did a checkout flight in this flying club plane and did stalls and slow flight and stuff with the checkout guy
Yeah.
in the plane. And I said, "Man, thanks for sharing that with me." It's a video. It's actually on Brian Siskin's YouTube channel of his checkout in that 172. You should check it out. But he sent it to me and I watched it and I wrote him back. I said, "Oh man, thanks. That inspired me. I haven't done a stall or slow flight just practice since my check ride a year and a half ago." And then he sent back, said, "Yeah, I read it as like, oh, maybe I think about doing with a CFI." And I'm like, "No, I'm not doing it. I'm taking it out and I'm just going to go do it." I mean, I feel like I could just totally, I'm not worried about them at all, or like if I end up in a bad situation or whatever. I think the point, so we never really closed the loop on that email thread. The point would be if I did feel unsure uh, in any way, I would definitely take an instructor. Like if I was going to work on stuff that was unfamiliar to me, or I felt in any way that I was not up to the task maybe of doing, I would
Yeah.
not hesitate to take someone else to help me do that. So the point I wasn't trying to say like, go do it. Yeah, what are you doing? Go. I wasn't telling you to do that. I was saying,
Yeah.
in my case, I feel like I'm not worried about that. But it's
Right.
always a good idea if you've got resources.
I've had an inadvertent wing over incident that scared me, and you have not. And that's
Yeah.
the difference. I mean, honestly, that's the difference.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still burnt in my brain. And then even when I did this checkout flight, you know, I really learned that different CFIs have different, like I freaked this guy out when I did the power on stall. He was like, "Ah, that was a little aggressive." And I'm like, "Well, this is how I learned to do it, man." He was sort of like really ginger with the throttle and kind of prolonging this kind of, it was very gentle. Whereas the way I learned was like slow down to rotation speed and crank it in and crank it up. Don't wait all day so you don't get into this like hammerhead, like just, but going full power. I don't know. Anyway, I
Right.
didn't do particularly great even on my checkout flight. I didn't get us into a spin or anything, but I just feel like for stalls, I honestly, I'm just telling you from my perspective, I don't know how that's I don't wanna learn how to stall well, I wanna learn how to recover from stalls, and let me tell you, I have recovered from stalls. I know how to recover from a stall. So if the only issue is the exacerbation of the flight, the state of flight to a point of, erroneous things happening, just if you're deliberately putting the flight or the plane into a bad situation, I just feel like have a CFI. Like just like I don't know, like just to me, like I know it seems goofy, right? It's like I remember my dad taking me and doing stalls when I was a little kid, putting a little pencil up on the dash and then watching it float and all that. And I'm not afraid of them. It's just I've just seen how quickly it can go real bad, real fast, even when you think you're totally in control. And it so I'm like, why would I don't know. For any other thing, like maneuvers, like, yeah, sure, like fly on your own. But if you're stalling the airplane, it just seems ridiculous. I don't know. Maybe I'm just weird.
I
Like, what's the
mean,
point? Like, why if I'm by myself, why am I stalling the airplane?
I,
To learn how to recover when you already know how to recover.
yeah,
You're not gonna get any
practice
feedback.
recovery. Oh
You're not
yeah,
you're
yeah, but you
nobody's
know
gonna
when it's
tell you
good or
like, "Hey,
bad.
that
I
was."
heard you call. Yeah, but I heard you calling your own out, your own recoveries. You were
Yeah, yeah.
self-critiquing your own
Oh,
stuff.
I beat myself up thoroughly, and I'm looking for the CFI to pick me back up because I beat myself up.
Yeah,
That's a different no, I'm just kidding.
I think it'll come with like I don't think I think when you're like 1,000 hours,
Oh, yeah,
I
yeah.
don't think you're gonna take a CFI every time you wanna go out and practice slow flight installs, which you'll still be doing 1,000 hours, like, or I hope so. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah. I was still getting checked out for different planes and
right, so
whatever,
there'll be
but
other stuff along the
no,
way.
slow fights, no problem. Um, I don't mind doing it's to me, like I said, just the exacerbation of the state of flying to the point of having that happen. It's like
Yeah.
it's bordering on like sort of doing kind of aerobatics in a way or something. It's sort of like, well, okay, why am I doing this? I know how to recover, but anyway, I know it, I don't get any satisfaction out of like being the cautious guy. I just try to like go away from the sort of bravado part of it and just go, okay, how do I intellectually, why is this valuable? Risk versus reward. But I just
Kevin
worry.
Webb
Yeah.
Shows up with, who is an instructor in our flight club,
Yeah.
checked me out in the
He'll take
235.
my money.
Well, I'm waiting to see. He shows up. His comment is a smiley face emoji. So
Yeah.
what I really want him to type, and he needs a comment in here, is what is his real take on that? Because I mean, I'm just saying, I I I want to hear if he thinks. I mean, what do you think? Am I? I haven't done a stall for 18 months. I'm going to go do one. The moment that I can get out of Fairmont Airport in the 172 that is not snowed in, I'm taking it to the practice area and I'm going to go do slow flight installs. Crazy? I mean, I don't
I
think
don't think it's
so. I mean,
crazy.
I slow flight install every time I land the thing. So what is the? Uh, I'm curious. I don't know. I can't interpret his smiley face very well, but he's got 3 minutes to get the reply in. So
Speak
otherwise, the
now.
stream is going to end and it's going to be over. So we'll see what he has to say. What else is
Oh,
happening in chat? Lots of talk about steakhouses at airports.
I
Uh,
like how this has devolved into sort of like a bad Facebook poll.
Ben Singer's trying to get you to come to KRYY. You need to
Oh
look
yeah.
that up.
All right.
172 miles because there's a steakhouse there, and you guys should go eat that.
KRYY.
Yeah, so check it out. I guess we could do that
Cobb
on the.
County. That's near Atlanta. Okay. 20
That may
mile,
be an option.
21 miles northwest of Atlanta. That is a good sort of mid-range, 172 miles. That's a good stepping stone kind of distance. And honestly, like I would be coming back the same day. So it would be in effect, going that distance without necessarily the overnight, to meet that kind of halfway test. So yeah, Ben, hit me up and, sell me more on this, steakhouse situation.
There you go. Let's see what else. Kevin Kuhn. I want to visit an airport with a steakhouse. I will. We will make that happen, sir. I took I took Kevin to a diner at a restaurant about 50 miles away. It was not a steakhouse, but I have a good one we can go to. Instructor Kevin Webb. I agree with both sides. If you're comfortable with the maneuvers, no need to be hesitant to go practice. Never a bad idea to get feel for the plane when it gets slow. But having an instructor is also never a bad idea, especially if you may have a checkout, flight review, etc. coming up. Or really anytime you're not comfortable. That's what his point was. Like, if you're comfortable with the maneuvers, no need to worry about it.
Well,
If
let me
you
ask you this, Chris.
Yeah.
When is your flight review due?
September of this year.
Just
I
knock
was
it out.
hoping
Just do that.
I'm still hoping to have another check ride by then, for my
Ah,
instrument rating,
right,
but
right,
I
right.
have procrastinated, and now winter is here, and now other circumstances with availability. I don't know. We're going to have to see if I can pull that off still. I'm hopeful. Uh,
I started studying for my instrument, and I'm just trying to get these cross country hours done, and then imagine a better world financially that maybe I'll come into at some point. By the way, yeah, this is a good comment. I mean, and I meant to mention this, that I have I've gotten the name of an instructor locally that will do spin training in a 172. And I want to do that really bad. And then ultimately, I'd love to get a tail wheel also. But more than anything, I think if I go through and get spin training, I feel like that, backing that up, I'm really going to have a feel for how absurdly difficult it is to actually stall spin a 172, and I will be confident with the outcome. So that's a great piece of advice, and I'm definitely on the path to doing that. And I'm looking to do. I've already reached out to an aerobatics instructor, and his plane's an annual right now. But in the spring, summer, I'm going to be doing loops and all kinds of fun things.
Real quick, let's wrap up with a couple more. Ben Singer just became a Patreon member. Thank
All
you
right,
very much for that. Very much appreciate the
you should have a
support.
bell.
Ding! Yeah, Rachel's yay. I will share email address with Brian if you guys want to hook up and eat a steak. I'll be jealous, but also good for you guys.
And I also wanted to mention that yesterday, Bearded Aviator is the guy that I went to go see down at his home airport, Center Piedmont, Cherokee County in Alabama, and he was nice enough to come out, make sure he was there for us to meet. Hung out for a couple hours. He showed me all around the airport there. It was amazing. I just put up a video of it on my channel. You can kind of get a sense of how great his airport is, and it's such the sort of opposite of the environment I trained in. And your environment, Chris, is similar, right? Fairmont's small. Everybody knows everybody, kind of a thing.
Right,
Whereas I
right.
grew up in I trained in a madhouse of chaos, and people just want you out of their way. So anyway, but cheers to Mike. That was a really it was one of those moments where you're like, and Johnny McClung was the one that was saying, midlife pilot training. Yeah. Have goals in mind. And I'm telling you, a day like what I had yesterday is what it's all about to me. Like the idea that I can get into a plane, fly by myself to another place that I've never been before, safely, fine, get there, have lunch with a friend, and somebody that's also a pilot. Congratulations on your check ride again, Mike. And he showed me his airplane that's getting put back together, and I learned all these things and saw all these things, and got to be in an environment that I would have never been in for any other
Mhm.
reason in my entire life. And I was so glad to just even be there for a couple of hours. Those little things, those little exposures and cultural explorations to meet, like meeting people, like that's the best part of it all. And I'm just now even getting into that. So keep your eyes on that prize if you're looking to go down the path of private pilot. It's totally worth it.
We got to wrap this up. One more thing, though.
Yep.
I promised that we would do, and then we didn't,
Oh,
which was we kind of like, we jumped into the flight. We looked at a sectional chart, and then we were like, that's the end of the flight planning. I
and scene.
and I said we would look at the cool little airports around
Oh, yes, yes,
right
yes.
around the Outer Banks. What I just think is the coolest thing. We've got this is where we're flying into, right? So here's mainland of the United States. This is North Carolina. Then you've got the Sound, and then Roanoke Island is where Dare County Regional is. So you drive down here, you take over. The Wright brothers First Flight Airport and the Wright Monument is just right up here. The house we're staying at is up here. Right beside Pine Island, which is private, which I'm working on. I'm trying so hard to get permission to use that airport during our trip, because it is literally 2 minutes from our house. Like, it would be unbelievable if we could bring a couple planes up here, even
I
if we
looked at
didn't
it. It's an
all come
awesome
up.
approach too.
Oh man, just some of the video of that. But then check this out. I'm talking about, this land is so thin down through here. Look at this. Some of these islands are kind of crazy. Then you come down here to Hatteras Island, Cape Hatteras. So it's a ferry ride to get to Hatteras Island. I'm sorry, there's a road, but then there's a ferry to get down to Ocracoke Island. So there's Billy Mitchell Airport there on Hatteras. Then this way down here is Ocracoke Island. I'm saying, look how narrow the islands are here. It's just amazing scenery to see. And this is totally foreign to me. Not done this kind of flying. We're talking about all the things we haven't done. Like I have not. This is all new to me. But I am so incredibly excited to go check out just the scenes. And I think it's going to be a super cool weekend in April. I hope that we can fill up our house, with a handful of people who want to stay with us. But then also, if it turns into a bigger thing where people want to come down, and I can provide uh, recommendations on where to stay or how to do things if we want to try to get a separate group coming separately to come and just hang out that weekend. Now, of course, we may all get there on Thursday. Weather may be terrible Friday and Saturday, in which case we will enjoy.
We'll just podcast the whole time.
We're going to record a version of this podcast. We are going to do that while we're there, but also we'll hang out and eat great food and just enjoy the time. And
we'll suffer through it. Yeah. But I think I have in my mind, Chris, the weather's perfect. So I'm just going to go with what I have in my mind. But I also just wanted to throw in, what about formation flying?
We'll have to have. Okay, I think we probably ought to do a thing about that at some point on this podcast, probably before now and then. We probably do need to talk to some people. Right. I mean, how many you've watched YouTube videos? I mean, I follow a ton of YouTubers. That's like I'm an expert, right? I've seen YouTubers do it. I mean, I have a very base level understanding of kind of the common practices when you get a group of people together. But we would definitely want to be more formalized than that before we head out. And there's like 7 airplanes trying to like maneuver together of different types. I mean, who knows what all we'll have and different speeds. So we're going to have to plan it properly.
We'll just have the 172 crew. And then, if you're in a Mooney, you can just be on your own because that's what you want to be anyway.
Very good. Well, I appreciate your time. We're over, but thanks for doing the podcast tonight. Thanks to everybody. What a great crowd tonight in the chat. It was very, very great to talk to all of you. I see we've got a couple. Should acknowledge One Dog Geek also says that he joined Patreon tonight and signed up for the trip.
Cool.
So we're filling up the house here pretty quick.
This is crazy.
So we're getting real close. That's awesome. Thank you and welcome.
We're super excited. My electric bill over here and see what happens. No, that is awesome. So we'll get to see his plane, and so that is radical. By the way, somebody did say Ron Dillard is fabulous. M54 Lebanon, Tennessee for advanced tailwheel. He's also the guy that will do spin recovery, I believe, and all that. But I've heard great things about this Ron Dillard. So anyway, thank you, Mike, for that recommendation. That you're just echoing what I've already heard, so that makes it even better.
Very cool. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed tonight. I know we kind of, I don't know, I feel like we kind of, the flight planning is
what we do.
Here's the flight plan.
This is what we do.
And move on. But if you've been around for the first 7 episodes, you kind of know the vibe of how this goes. So.
You set intentions and then just stuff happens. It's kind of like, I don't know, we're sort of like an experimental jazz group, really, if you think about it. No, but it's all good. I know you got to go. I got to go. Everybody, thanks so much. Chris, play. By the way, like people were freaking out about this music in the top of this thing. It's super suspenseful and crazy. Maybe people either need to toughen up or we need to find some softer air supply sounding music.
I mean, do you know where I could find someone who is a musician / recording engineer who could potentially make us some theme music? Do you know anyone?
I'll look around. I'll see. Yeah, I'll see. All right. Well taken. I got 2 weeks.
Thank you so much. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Appreciate everybody's support as always. Enjoyed talking with you all, and we will see you next time on the Midlife Pilot Podcast. So long.